And good afternoon, everyone. This is Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor. My name is Jim, and this is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog network. This is a directed network, and I am net control. If at any time during this net should an emergency arise, please notify net control, and we'll stand by and allow those in need to access this frequency. Is there any emergency or priority traffic at this time?
At this time.
And hearing nothing, we will continue. This net is all about ham radio and being all that you can be. That's what our Qso-Vlog network is all about, trying to help people achieve the best sounding station possible. Thanks for dropping by. FYI, my background is 50 years in commercial broadcasting, where a lot of big bucks are spent on audio processing equipment and getting it set up correctly to get the loudest, best-sounding station possible. Well, long story short, when I became a ham radio operator, I could hear immediately a large discrepancy in on-air technical proficiency. A lot of stations were running with very poor mic equalization, very muddy, with little articulation. And as I continued to work stations, I realized most of the stations were also running very low average peak modulation, many around 30% of average peak modulation. So with my background, I felt I could help, or at least try. I knew that most modern-day ham transceivers did have enough onboard processing equipment to be able to overcome most all of the problems. So it would just be a matter of setting a generic dynamic range setup procedure and then adjusting the onboard EQ gear. And so I started the Qso-Vlog network with the phrase, if you have a radio you want to check out, give us a shout. And today we're currently featuring over 2,200 Qso-Vlog Aircheck recordings. And you can access these recordings by going to YouTube and doing a call letter search for KC9VKV followed by the word logbook. That's Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor followed by the word logbook. And we also have a new series called KC9VKV Highlights. That's Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor followed by the word highlights on a YouTube search. These are some of our less technical and more human nature, philosophical kinds of QSO'S. That's KC9VKV Highlights on a YouTube search. Both KC9VKV Logbook and KC9VKV Highlights are segments of our main YouTube homepage of Jim's Radio Story, where we celebrate a 50-year career in commercial broadcasting, a 50-year journey from a 5-watt pirate radio station as a 12-year-old to production director of a major 50,000-watt AM broadcast facility. And the thing that makes this truly a unique story is I have the actual audio masters from all along the way. Over 2,600 shows, including many full-length major music concerts and radio productions. Our mission statement for the Qso-Vlog network is to establish a higher technical level of radio transmissions of the human voice by the intelligent utilization of available electronics in current amateur radio transceivers. Our setup, while generic in nature, converts the average 10 dB dynamic range transmitter with an average 30% of peak modulation to a much fuller 3 dB dynamic range with an average 80 to 85% of peak modulation. This substantial boost in audio transmit level is extremely beneficial in high noise levels and heavy QRM. It allows you to punch through when others fail. The second part of our transmitter setup has to do with proper mic equalization. We're looking for a higher degree of intelligibility through the use of EQ patterns that bring out the articulation aspects of the human voice. Again, why need to hear the voice if you can't understand the words? And this afternoon on the receive side, we're running 4 Internet SDR receivers, monitoring New York, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Virginia, trying to get the best copy from our 100-watt friends. Now the audio from these 4 SDR receivers comes up on a 6th position rotary selector. Also on the selector is our local receiver audio. Today our local receiver is running 3 large 10-foot vertical magnetic loop antennas, one aimed at 0 degrees, one aimed at 90 degrees, and the number 3 is aimed at 134 degrees. In addition, 2 of the 3 may be rotated separately. They are selected by a 6th position rotary selector. Also today on the transmit side, we'll be running our new SWR specially oriented resonant dipole antenna. One leg of this resonant dipole runs broadside to Montreal, Canada. The other leg runs broadside to Miami, Florida. As we were constructing our station, our mantra was 20 over from Montreal to Miami with a hotspot through the Carolinas. And although conditions may vary, the general performance of this antenna supports its mission. Also today we'll be running our input source indicator. So when we switch from an internet SDR receiver to our local receiver, you'll be able to hear the switch and see the switch. You'll have to check it out on our YouTube Qso-Vlog video. And as we come together for another Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog network, let us pause just a moment for the amateur radio operator's prayer. Lord, we pray for clear 20 over S9 communications today. Let all our transmissions fill the air and reach their destinations at QSA5 to be understood by all. And as we pray for good radio conditions, let us also pray for good human conditions. During this time of pandemic that has challenged us all, we pray that you will protect everyone, especially our elderly. And also, Lord, we seek your divine intervention to bring peace to a very divided United States. As we go through a very conflicting time in America's history, with dark clouds all around, we pray that you will reduce life's daily political QRM between our brothers and sisters, and through your love and guidance, show us the way to find peace and harmony. Help us to communicate with one another 20 over S9. Thank you, Lord, and God bless and protect America. Amen. To continue, since this part of the band has many nets trying to operate in a very confined area, I would appreciate all stations checking into our Qso-Vlog net to keep their band pass to no wider than 100 to 2900. And again, please, no wider than 100 to 2900. This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog network. And now let's check in and see if Charlie K1GZL is on frequency to bring us up to date on the latest 40-meter band propagation. Charlie's QTH is up north in northern New Hampshire near the Canadian border. Charlie, got a copy?
Canadian border. Charlie, got a copy?
Yeah, I sure do, Jim. Very, very Q5, direct. Direct as I don't have facilities to pick up the SDR, and the temperature is very chilly. At noon it was 55 degrees, and right now it's 53 degrees, mostly cloudy with the sun trying to break through, and it's chilly. I've got a pretty good reception of Captain Mike, where we've dropped our power here down to 0.4 of a watt, and he acknowledges that, and that was recorded 6 days ago as he was flying over Missouri, heading directly towards St. Louis on his way from Sacramento, California to Philadelphia. If you copy, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Excellent copy. 30 over on Milford. Roger.
Excellent copy. 30 over on Milford. Roger.
Okay, here's Captain Mike, I hope.
See, where are we? We're just coming up, we're almost exactly due west of St. Louis here. I'm showing us about 90 miles west of St. Louis, so not quite to Illinois yet, but there you go. We're still smooth as can be up here, over. So it's too bad he's not on. I definitely probably get a really good signal report from him there. When I've flown over Mike's place, WA30, he once told me I was 60 over, had his meter completely pinged, and that lasted for a minute or two as we went over the top there. So, but anyway, okay, Charlie. Well, good copy on you there. I can't tell you how much stronger you are, but you're definitely 5'9 plus. K1GZL, KX4 Whiskey Charlie. K1GZL, KX4 Whiskey Charlie. Charlie at 1 watt over Missouri. You are 53 on 1 watt. K1GZL, KX4 Whiskey Charlie.
Okay, now he picks me up at 0.4 of a watt. 0.4 of a watt. 1/60th. No.
Okay, Charlie, at 0.4 watt over Missouri. You're, I guess, about a 5.2. It didn't really drop too much. You're still Q5. Back to you, Charlie. I noticed a difference, but at 93 watts, you're a 5.9 plus. So I don't think you really even need the amplifier at this point, Charlie.
Okay. Yes. When you look at 0.4 watt that he was copying, that I believe just about that is 150th of the power of a 60-watt light bulb. QRP is a very interesting thing, Mike. KC9VKV, K1GZL. I hope you copied that okay.
Roger, Charlie. Yes, yeah. I've never been in favor of QRP as personally, because I always try to get there in a reasonable fashion, and the only way I could probably do that, in my mind, is a KW and a good resonant dipole antenna. But I appreciate the efforts of the other folks that are going down on those very low fraction of a watt transmissions and seeing how they do, Roger.
The transmissions and seeing how they do, Roger.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how well things can work out if propagation will cooperate. If the cooperation is right there, and then it can get through, I would suspect. Don't forget, Captain Mike has only got an 8-foot antenna, an 8-foot antenna connected to the upper part of the tail of the Boeing 767 two-engine jet. And I believe he was at 35,000 feet. 35,000 feet, and the temperature was just about 50 below 0 Fahrenheit. While on the ground in Missouri at that time, the temperature was well over 90 degrees, maybe 95 degrees at that time. It's unbelievable. Well, look, Jim, I realize you may have a lot of stations that would like to check out their rigs and so forth. And I certainly hope we can work you next Friday, and I'll try to give you some kind of an update on any progress I can make on changes in the 40-meter situation. And I'd like to get that quad really working. So the very best, Jim, and thank you so much for your patience with me. KC9VKV, K1GZL.
Roger, Charlie. 73 of that way, sir. Always a pleasure. Thanks for dropping by and getting us and keeping us informed on the travels of Captain Mike and his jet. This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog net. My name is Jim, KC9VKV, and better known in some circles as Dr. VKV. And we are recording now live till 5, so if you have a radio you want to check out, give us a shout. We'll post this recording up on YouTube in the next couple of days. So when you go to YouTube, just do a call letter search for KC9VKV, followed by the word logbook. That's Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor, followed by the word logbook. And that will take you to our YouTube Qso-Vlog page, where we're currently featuring over 2,200 Qso-Vlog Aircheck recordings. This recording will be cut number 1 in that series. And we also have a new series called KC9VKV Highlights. That's Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor, followed by the word highlights on a YouTube search. These are some of our less technical, more human nature, philosophical kinds of QSO'S. You'll have to check it out. KC9VKV Highlights on a YouTube search. Well, let's get on with it now. If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
You have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
Whiskey 1, Sierra, November. Whiskey 1, Sierra, November.
Sierra, November. What's the name there?
Sierra, November. What's the name there?
Okay, very good. The prefix is Whiskey 1, and if you're pointing, I am in Connecticut. Charlie Tango, Connecticut. Whiskey 1, Sierra, November. Over to you, sir.
Roger. And what's the name there?
Roger. And what's the name there? The name.
1, Sierra, November. 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 1,
I'm sorry, sir. I was monitoring Milford SDR, and they just kicked me off. They do that from time to time. It's really strange. You can have, all of the. You can do nothing, and they'll kick you off for just being there. And then if you do too much or stay too long, they'll kick you off. So you just have to go with the flow, I guess. So anyway, Sierra Nancy, come back with the name, please.
Sierra Nancy.
Okay, very good. It's one of those things you have to understand. If you think water and cake and pipe are strange things, you should try RF. The name here is Scott, Sierra Charlie Oscar Tango Scott, and located in Connecticut.
Roger, Scott, and what radio are you running today, sir?
And what radio are you running today, sir?
Well, as a matter of fact, that's why I'm sort of here. And it is fortuitous that I dropped by. That is a Icom 7300, and my primary radio, which was a 10 this morning, the main receiver went out, so I'm ready to go into a box. But unfortunately, it's been a long time since I played with this radio, and I did put in a new microphone since on the 7610 I run a Sennheiser 421, and the ICOM, the 7300 has a 5-volt bias on the line, and that you cannot turn off. You can turn off on the 7610. So I'm using Heil ICM, I think is the designation, because it's not a dynamic. Over to you, sir.
Yes, sir. Well, first thing, if you'll be interested in our setup procedure, verifying that we're in that wide transmit mode, 100 to 2900 wide mode transmit, Roger?
Wide mode transmit, Roger.
And it is wide.
Yes, sir. Next part then goes to the compressor on and at a 3. It's a token amount, something you'll never hear on the air, but it helps us in the end get to our 3 dB dynamic range. So compressor on at a 3, Roger?
At a 3, Roger.
As a matter of fact, it's on at a 2. I'm kicking about 5 dB of compression, and with a mic gain of 35%.
Roger. If you'd move that up to 3, we could press on. Like I said, 3 is, just a very shade hotter, but there's still nothing that you're going to hear on the air.
Still nothing that you're going to hear on the air.
Okie dokie, it is up to a 3, and I'm getting about 7 to 10 on peaks compression.
Roger. Okay, now move to your ALC with mic gain in hand, and as you say the magic word audio, don't stress it, just say it, stretch the A out so you can get a good reading, and with your mic gain, as you say the word, you adjust for mid-scale to 2/3 on your ALC meter, Roger?
Your ALC meter, Roger.
Okay, you're going for 2/3, and let me see, we'll have to knock it down some. And Mary had a little land, the sleeve was white as snow, and I'm down almost to nothing. Mic gain, and it has not moved down. There's a little bit. I backed off the mic.
Yes, Scott, the word is audio. Audio gives you a nice steady state tone there to make your adjustment. It cuts out all of the ambiguities of various word level changes. So if we just say the word audio, it gets just like a setup tone, what it is. That'll help you nail that 2/3, Roger.
That 2/3, Roger.
Okay, propagation has gone south on us, but I think you said the word audio, and it's different. Right at ALC is about, it's not going over the little red line, but it is at about 45 to 50%. I think I'll just keep it there. And is the intelligibility good on the signal? That's the main thing I'm interested in.
Yes, sir. Well, we want to get our audio ballistically correct before we start EQing, because If you don't, then when you start EQing, it's going to be a different ball game. So we want to get our dynamic range at 3 dB, and that's what the whole front end of this setup is about: is getting your audio at a 3 dB dynamic range, which means that your average percent of peak modulation at that point would be between 80 and 85%. So the ideal spot. The ideal sweet spot is halfway between mid-scale and 2/3, although you can't camp right there, so we give you an excursion area between 50% and 66 and 2/3%, as you move right between those 2 points. Roger?
Right between those 2 points, Roger?
Okay. In that case, we're good. Audio. All right, we're good. We're getting about 15 dB of compression when I do that. But I'm sitting right at about 50% on ALC, and if I crank it up to about 65, it doesn't get any but worse. Just what's happening is the compression's going crazy on me. So, and I don't think I want that much compression.
You're looking good there. You're looking right at 3 dB when you moved up to that 2/3% on your ALC. So let's move to, I think you're really close, so let's move to your EQ. And what type, you're in the 7300, so you have a simplistic equalization situation there. And I would suggest moving your top end EQ, treble EQ +2 from where it is. +2 clicks, boost, treble EQ from where you are.
Boost, treble EQ from where you are.
Okay, again, you're dropping out wow, we're up at about 15 dB compression now. If my EQ is set for -2 treble bass and +2 for treble. -2 bass, +2 treble.
Roger. I would move that top treble EQ +2 more, so we are at +4 treble EQ, 2 additional from where you are. Roger.
2 additional from where you are. Roger.
Okay, it'll take me a second to get there. Okay, that is a +4 treble, still -2 bass.
Yes, sir. Now, why don't you give me about 10 seconds and tell me about your antenna system so I can hear you.
About your antenna system so I can hear you.
Okay, the antenna system is currently loop. That's a horizontal loop. And it works very good on 80 and 30, not so good on 40. So we're running an LVG 1000 Pro auto tuner, and I'm kicking in about 400 watts on an ACOM 600S amplifier, and that's about it.
Roger. Why don't you drop that compressor back to a 2? A compressor back to a 2, and tell me the best thing you like about the 7300.
Best thing you like about the 7300.
Okay, and now the compressor is back at 2, and I'm peaking about 20 dB of compression, and normal talking, I'm sitting right around between 10 and, let's say, 14. And what about the 7300, sir? W1SSN, oh, by the way.
Gosh, I was just listening to your audio. I think you might be a little close to that mic. I'd move back an inch or two, further back off that mic some, so we don't have quite as much mouth noise. I would say about an inch or inch and a half, somewhere like that.
At an inch or inch and a half, somewhere like that.
Okie dokie, this is quite a bit, but not quite a bit. It's about an inch away, I guess. I got too close. Well, I call them a spit sock. I have a very nice spit sock on the Sennheiser, and this other microphone has a very flimsy spit sock. So the attenuation of mouth noise is probably not as good, as you said. And again, W1SSN.
Yes, sir. It sounds a whole lot better. It's just, it's one of those small things, but, a windscreen, just as a foam windscreen is just so nice. It just, takes out all of the no-nos and leaves the yay-yays, and it just makes all the difference in the sound, Roger.
Makes all the difference in the sound, Roger.
Okay, very good. All right. So, my bottom line is not necessarily, audio quality or, CD quality or even FM radio quality on sideband. I just wanted to make sure that it was intelligible, and I'm thinking that your settings that you gave me are looking pretty good here. And I want to thank you for your time and effort, sir. And when I get the 7610 back up, maybe I'll come sneaking by on a Friday afternoon and check it out again.
Yes, sir, Scott. And obviously we are recording now, so if you want to hear your radio, if you go to YouTube, do a call, let a search for KC9VKV, followed by the word logbook. That will take you directly to this recording. It'll be cut number 1 in a series of 2200 Qso-Vlog Aircheck recordings. So YouTube search for KC9VKV, followed by the word logbook, and we'll have it uploaded by noon tomorrow. Roger?
Uploaded by noon tomorrow, Roger.
Okay, thank you ever so much, Jim. Airchecks is not something I like to do anymore, so we'll just stay away from that. The last thing I want to do is hear myself on recording again. All right, sir, thank you ever so much for your time and effort, as I said. And this is W1SSN clear with you, and scooping back down to CW.
Roger, Scott, just out of curiosity, though, I'm curious why you would not want to hear your audio. The hardest thing in the world is to, set up something, listening with earphones to yourself in real time. I'm just wondering why you wouldn't want to listen to yourself in the abject situation of not participating in the conversation and objectively evaluating your audio. I'm just curious about that.
Your audio. I'm just curious about that.
Well, it's never going to sound as good as I think it's supposed to sound, and I've got a couple of hours worth of air checks here. We're using a little better equipment than a sideband. So I'm thinking that if the goal for amateur radio, in my opinion, like noses, is it should be intelligible, and it shouldn't necessarily hurt your ears, but every now and then it's going to. And that's just the way I feel, Jim.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I'm just curious. We go to great pains to get as abstract a recording as we can, not adding anything to it. We're very, very close to having adding nothing to the recording. We go direct. There is no room noise. We have our receiver under AGC compression, so there is no added noise. This is as close to a God recording as you can get, Roger.
To a God recording as you can get, Roger.
Okay, thanks a lot. I may take a look at it, but and thank you for the opportunity. So, Jim, I am clear with you. W1SSN. Thank you ever so much, sir.
Roger, Scott, 73. You have a great afternoon and a beautiful weekend. Thanks for dropping by, and if you get a chance, join us next Friday. This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog Net. My name is Jim, and if you have a radio that you want to check out, give me a shout. Not hearing anything at the moment to give us a chance to jump in and do one of our features. Thrilling edition of Adventures in Radioland, this segment, Antennas That Work. After 5 years and over 1,900 Qso-Vlog setups and recordings, we've worked our way down to those that can really use our help. That's precisely why many months ago, in addition to my local receiver, I started using 4 geographically chosen Internet SDR receivers. I know that when my local receiver and all 4 SDR receivers are receiving a signal poorly, there are probably antenna issues involved, because I believe a 100-watt transmitter operating generally in the eastern part of the United States should show up at least as an S5 to S9 somewhere. If you're an S1 everywhere, you're not getting out. Let me repeat that. If you're an S1 everywhere, you're not getting out. So, while I can technically set up your transmitter for optimal performance, if you are operating with a poor antenna, you'll not be getting out well. And let me repeat that. If you're operating with a poor antenna, you will not be getting out well. Radio antenna tuners do not solve the problem. They only mask the problem so the radio will operate correctly. A bad antenna is still a bad antenna. So now you're on the air with a bad antenna. The real name of the game is ERP over ADI. How well do you bring your effective radiated power over your area of dominant influence? And that just means how well you're getting out into the area you wish to be heard. Now, you can blame poor performance on bad propagation till the cows come home, but if you're an S1 everywhere, you're not getting out. And I propose a change in your life. A great answer to an amateur's worst problem. It is the antenna we've been using over the past 5 years here on Friday afternoons for our Qso-Vlog network. It is the resonant-tuned, no SWR, specifically oriented dipole antenna. Yes, it's a dipole antenna, but a resonant-tuned dipole antenna. Look, Ma, no antenna tuner. Because they are tuned, they have no SWR to deal with, and you're straight out of your radio to the antenna. No conversion loss antenna tuner to deal with. You are max fire to the wire. If you want to get out, get yourself on the air with a resonant-tuned, no SWR, specifically oriented dipole antenna. It would be one of the greatest gifts you could give your station operation. And we don't sell them, but, you can Google plans for free, and they're easy to build. I hope talking about no SWR resonant dipole antennas will at least stir up some interest in building new, more effective antennas. And remember that dipole antennas are directional. So if you know the area in which you wish to radiate, you just run your dipole antenna broadside to that location, and your maximum radiation will occur in the target area that you're looking for. So there you go. Just an idea that maybe the antenna that you're running is not the best antenna. And I'm not saying the resonant dipole antenna is the best antenna, but it's the one I'm using right now, and I know that it works fairly well. So I'm just suggesting that you might try that. They're cheap enough to build. The wires almost nothing. The insulators are nothing. So I would say it would be worth your effort to build yourself a resonant dipole antenna and just check it out. Get an AB switch and put your own antenna, your old antenna, on that with the dipole antenna, and then you can switch back and forth and make your own evaluations as to whether the dipole antenna is better than your current antenna. Well, anyway, this is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog net. We're on the air recording now live till 5. So if you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
Have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
Alrighty, we're going to go one more time here. I've got things I got to do, so we're going to run it up the flag one more time, and if we don't hear nothing, we're going to shut her down. I'm going to go fishing. This is KC9VKV, the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog net. If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
There's somebody back in there, sir. Come back slowly, phonetically, with your call sign.
Sir, come back slowly, phonetically, with your call sign.
I got you. Tell you what, sir, station calling, give me about 10 seconds. Tell me about your antenna system. Let me look around and see if I can find a better path for us, Roger.
You can find a better path for us, Roger.
Didn't copy anything that time. Tell you what, try it one more time. Tell me about the best thing you like about your radio, and for about 10 seconds, and let me see if I can pull you out.
About 10 seconds, and let me see if I can pull you out.
Yeah, I'm copying you only on Milford, so let me just hang there, and I tell you, come up on mic and give me your call sign slowly, phonetically, one more time.
Give me your call sign slowly, phonetically, one more time.
Yeah, I am sorry, sir. I went around the horn. I'm not copying you anywhere but Milford, and you're only about half a dB over the Milford SDR noise level. So I don't think that's gonna work. I can hear you in there, but I can't pull you out. You know, maybe if we had this conversation yesterday when we had some better propagation, I could have maybe set you up a little bit better. That I may be able to copy you even at a half a dB above noise levels. That's the whole thing. When a radio is set up correctly, you have a lot better chance of being understood in adverse conditions. That's the whole idea. That's why we change a stock 10 dB dynamic range, 30% average peak modulation transmitter to a 3 dB dynamic range, 80 to 85% of average peak modulation. That's the reason we do that, so you will punch through in heavy QRM and noise. And folks will not only just hear you, but they'll be able to understand what you're saying, because the words that we leave at the end of it are not blurry. They're very pristine words, but very loud. You know, when you pass that 3 dB dynamic range mark, you can get louder, but the problem is your words start to blur. And blurry words are disadvantageous to intelligibility of what the word is. So we want to just get the word as fat as we can, but as clean as we can, and that's the whole idea behind this setup. This is KC9VKV, Friday afternoon, Qso-Vlog net.
That's called configuration. That's when you start bending wire. Why? Because you want to confuse them and get them all to go in the same direction. Haven't tried a zigzag rhombic yet, but don't you think I ain't thinking of it? So KC9VKV, W1 Victor Delta Echo, Oregon. Still making mistakes.
Yeah, Roger. I was just curious now, that Virginia Beach target that you're referring to, that's your easterly antenna direction. Do you have anything further south as the central lobe as you do for Virginia?
Oh, this thing's pretty wide after you get out at 5K. Yeah, that's only let me see, 2,900 nautical miles out to Virginia Beach is. But that's a general direction. Into South America, this thing will literally tear a hole. Further out you go, the wider it gets, you know. You can't stop it. You can. You got to make the antenna longer. You got to make the antenna. I cover the Caribbean, and all of the south of Bermuda. Let's put it that way. South of Bermuda, which is 750 miles off of Virginia. It just covers the whole South Atlantic, south of Bermuda. It'll just tear a hole. It will actually cause ionization. They work different, and it's all done by the antenna, by the field that it presents. It's called volumetric efficiency. How many electrons, how much volume can you put a little bit of charge on, and then the electron moves, no matter what the charge is, it starts looking for other negative electrons. And boy, it takes off at the speed of light, all right?
Roger that, roger that. Did you ever happen to consider co-phasing some of those rhombics? So you have cancellation in some areas, and then but that signal would be applied in phase in other areas.
Well, I've had them stacked. I've had them, but they're smaller. They were smaller at that time. I found out, and this is gonna, you still have the same volume. You still have the same volume. You get steerability, but you don't move any more volume. Yeah, let's say they were smaller. I got to tell you that. Originally, I had them about 450 feet long, total length now. 450 long. I had them three of them stacked one above the other. Okay, I had steerage, and I had control. But if you make the antenna longer, and that's exactly what I did. I took down the top one, and I had a drug problem. I drugged that antenna, the top one, way out in front of the front one, opened it up, made the front V out of it, and I took the V out of it, made that where I joined them together, I made that the widest point. You get more wallop out of lengthening the antenna than you do by stacking them. Now, if I wanted to, I can gain 3 dB real quick by stacking what I have now. But this linear, if I go down to 4 degrees, I'm going to start kicking dust out. I start heating the ground. There's an angle that if you go below it, it's called a Swato-Brewster angle, is the name of it. It no longer radiates. It heats the ground. It drags its feet over the ground, and all of the electricity that we make and use we're not making anything. The sun does heat the earth, but all of the energy that we do use, our excess heat, is all absorbed by the ground. And just as all the sunlight comes in, hits the earth, it's all absorbed by the ground. Not all of it. That's why we get sunburn. But energy in any form is absorbed by the earth. It raises the temperature of the earth. Therein lies some of our problems. Never mind hot air,
Roger. Well, I tell you, whatever you're doing out there, you may be running a scorched earth policy or whatever it is, but you're sure moving some audio through the air. Like I say, you're about 20 and 30 over here, so it's definitely doing well. I was just curious, how many directional positions can you control?
I have 6 big rhombics on the 7 C's. There's one of them, 7 C's, and I got one here. I'll bring them up. This one's looking at South Africa, the South Atlantic. This one's looking at the exact same area, but over the Pacific and Indian Ocean, looking at Kerguelen Island. This one right here is looking at Europe. And then I gotta punch a button. And I gotta bring up 3 more rhombics. But it takes a minute, and I'll tell you what I did. I used out in the antenna shed where I feed from. I use step relay. Remember the old telephone? Maybe you don't. The old telephone relays, when you dial the number, click, 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 it was making a little jagged thing move a relay, click, 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 and it would bring up different switches. Well, I put that on the end of a capacitor in a D network, and that tunes the antenna SWR down. Takes about a minute for that thing to cycle, and I'll tell you why. It doesn't back up. The ratchet only is one way, so I have to go. The capacitor has to go through 180 degrees all the way around. So I avoid that unless I tune up that bank of antennas. And I'm cautious about, I can bring it up, but it's, and it looks in 6 different directions, so a total is 6 rhombics. But like I said, takes a minute and a half, sometimes, depending on the temperature outside. You would not think a relay would have doesn't have a heart or anything. Apparently these have heart, the old American Telephone and Telegraph Company, because has lazy days when, well, I may work and I may not, and probably accounts for the reason you used to get a lot of wrong numbers, but you still had to pay when the guy said hello over it.
Hey, roger that. Okay, I'm going to wait with you here while that seeks its recalibration points so you can give me those other antenna positions. It was outstanding, the first leg of this. I'm standing by for the second demonstration, Roger.
Oh, I didn't even bother firing that. I just gave you 3 of them. This one, let me look and see if I'm on the right one. Yeah, what I'm doing is I got a rotary switch up here by hand. I can just switch and make it kick on. I can make it kick on. The other ones I'll have to wait. I'll have to wait here myself, and I haven't kicked them probably for 3-4 months, so I'm a little cautious on it. There's a guy out here by the name of Murphy. I don't know. I run him off once with a shotgun here about 10 years ago, and I managed to keep him out of the yard. He may be sleeping in that antenna shed again. So I'm going to hold off on bringing up the other 3 here, but I can here. Wait a minute. Hello, 1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 1. Let me see. Oh, hello. Okay, I don't know. This one may or may not be looking up at you. This one here looks at Tahiti. This one right now. All of a sudden, somebody down in the South Pacific. You're off the back of it. Did it come up any, or?
It's down from your main transmission.
Okay, well, you're way up on it, so I'm going over you. I'm going up over you. You're in the back here. Let me go back around here. 1, 2, all right. 1, 1, 1. Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello. Doggone, I have to wait. There's a bridge out there that's controlling it. It's tuning. It's tuning right now. I'm watching the SWR, and if it goes by, it'll go 180 cycles. Oh, it has to 180 degrees. It's got to go all the way around again. It's got to go another 180 degrees if it misses it, because it can't back up. I've got to. What I should do is put a on the other end of the capacitor, extend the shaft, and then put one on that will whack over a couple of diodes and then make it run the other way so it could neutralize itself. But usually, if it goes down to 1.2 or so, it'll stop. So 1.2 at 200 ohms input is not really much of a mismatch. And they pretty well, with the tapered line that's feeding it, with the tapered exponential line that's feeding it, it pretty well takes care of it, because each quarter wave, and there's 14 of them, does, on this frequency, there's actually more than 14, there's about 18 quarter wavelengths. 96 inches long, roughly, so it's 92 feet, 98 feet, 5.5 inches long. and that's a minimum of 4 wavelengths at 10 megacycles. You always got to have a minimum of 4 quarter waves to get these things to work as an exponential feed line, which essentially takes you from 200 ohms to 600. So that's what it does, Jim. That's what you're listening to. And that's exactly, it's the old point-to-point system, except I don't run down to the ground and then parallel the ground. I run right from a pole right up askew at a slant, about 45 degrees up, 75 feet above the ground is where these are supported. The top upper end's about 7 inches wide, number 12 wire, and it comes right down till it's only about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch wide, which is 200 ohms input. So, and right on the end of that is 2 air balance that take me from the coax feed line impedance going into the antenna shed, where the relays are that snap over to each one of those homemade air balance. 2 coils wound parallel together in parallel on the input end, 14 turns, 1.5 inches in diameter, number 12 or 14 wire. The differential is not that significant. And in series on the output end. 50 ohms in, unbalanced, 200 ohms out into the balance. And I haven't chased the spiders out of the antenna shed either. So it's the middle of the winter. They're not going to appreciate me going in there with a flashlight or even a match lit over it.
Roger. KC9VKV with W1VDE. Roger, I've got a recording of you when you went through the antenna switching. I think if you would like to hear it, I could find it and play it back for you. It's quite outstanding.
Oh, all right. Well, as long as you didn't touch the volume control, because what happens, I've got to tell you, so you'll understand that. And the stronger I am, the AGC comes in and it cuts the RF amplifier off. You have to be able to switch your RF amplifier out of the circuit to see the drasticness of it. Just how drastic it is. Because what happens is when it's hammering the front end, it will cut the AGC cuts the RF amplifier out. When I go weak, the RF amplifier in the front of the receiver opens up. It's no longer super saturated.
Here's where the situation is. When they found out I was blind, my dad told all my other brothers, "You guys got 2 good eyes. You need to fend for yourself. We've got to work with Tom and, help him to develop." And, of course, they resented that. And that's probably the main reason they have nothing to do with me today, because my mom and dad gave me all the attention and affection they could possibly do it. Now, I didn't ask for it, but, that was just something that they did, Jim. So anyhow, I went to school in Columbus. I was in kindergarten, and at the school for the blind back then in kindergarten, and I don't know how it was at KSB because I don't know anything about KSB, but it was basically an orientation year to get you away from home and to introduce you to life in a residential school for the blind. There were about 220 other kids there from all other parts of Ohio at the time. And many of them did not go home. Their parents didn't have the money, or some of them just didn't want the kids, okay? And so what happened was they just stayed, and the state took care of them. They got to go home on major holidays. So anyway, that was that. I finally got used to it. I would cry every time they'd bring me back every weekend, and my brother said, "If you don't shut up, I'm taking you to the superintendent, and he has an electric paddle that he's going to use on you to shut you up, give you something to really cry about." Well, I shut up. And so that's what happened there, Jim. Well, kindergarten segued into first grade, and at that time we started learning Braille. And I didn't want to learn to read it because nobody that I knew read the stuff, you know. I said, man, I want to read the books with the blank pages. See, I couldn't understand why I was different. Why couldn't I do what my brothers did? And the teacher tried to tell me, Tom, you can't do it. She says, here's a print book. Tell me what the page says. Tell me what you see. And so I just ran my hands. Well, I don't see nothing. She says, that's my point. There is print on there, but without sight, you can't possibly see it. So to make a long story short, I failed first grade. Like she told my mom and dad, Tom is memorizing things and not learning. So anyhow, the second year I was back before at OSSB, I thought, well, what can I do? What do I like to do? Well, radio, man, that's cool. So I started dialing around on the radio. I didn't understand a whole lot of things about why the dial was laid out as it was. Remember now, I was just a 6-year-old kid. And my babysitter at the time introduced me to a station in Dayton, WING, owned by the Great Trails Broadcasting Corporation. I believe KLO in Louisville was owned them at one time. And I liked it. But the problem was at sunset, local sunset, they changed their pattern and lowered their power. And I would cry and cry and cry. You would have thought someone died. And, you know, we would visit people who lived in other parts of the county, and they would have WING, and I couldn't understand why they could hear it, and I couldn't hear it. I said to Dad, boy, I wish you had moved to where we could hear WING all the time. And he said, well, son, I do well to keep a roof over your head now. And so he bought our place where we lived on Possum Road on the GI Bill back in '46. And so my interest in radio came. We had a local station, which I referred to, WBLY. And it went off the air at local sunset. It had an FM, but I didn't know much about FM. I thought you just changed the dial from AM to FM, and there it was. Well, I didn't learn the difference until the spring of '61, how the FM dial was laid out. And you know, back in the day, the FCC had a special table of allocations on the FM dial that where stations could only have an ERP of 3,000 watts horizontal and 3,000 watts vertical at that time. And so anyhow, in 1960, one brother got a job as a salesman for WBLY. And my first experience, they had a talk show on there, a guy named Smilin' Bob, Robert Yount, who was the CEO at that time of the Champion City Broadcasting Company. Let me identify. This is K4LID.
And KC9VKV, Tom, your signal is excellent. Stayed up all the way, no fades. I wanted to ask you, you were talking about when you were younger, did you have a conception of what the printed page was, or did you have any idea what it was, since you've never saw one, No,
I didn't, Jim. I had no idea. I didn't understand why I couldn't read it. All I could do was feel a blank page, and I thought, man. But then when I learned Braille there for a time, I said, man, why can't print be like Braille? And I can get into another discussion about how Braille is and why it has to be the way it is, but no. I had absolutely no conception of the printed page because, in print, you can make the fonts bigger or smaller. But in Braille, you don't have that luxury.
Roger that. And so you went to the school for the blind, and how many years did you go to that school?
Well, I was there from September of '57 until June of '68, when I left there and went home to school to finish out my high school years at my beloved Shawnee High School in Springfield. Well, at the School for the Blind, they had started a radio club sponsored by QSO'S, the Central Ohio Amateur Radio Service. And there were two instructors that came to the school beginning in 1960. And what they would do, they would teach the code. And then they would also teach the theory. And the Columbus Amateur Radio Club gave the school a station. We had a Collins 75A3 receiver. We had a Central Electronics 200V transmitter, and we had homemade crystal-controlled transmitters for the novice band. And so they had switches, and we had braille markings with a braille label maker. When you turn the switch one way, like we had 37. At that time, the novice band was 3700 to 3750. And we had, and the 40-meter band was 7150 to 7200 then. And so we got on the air as we could, but the administration kind of frowned on that. So it didn't happen, and I don't know what happened, since it was a volunteer thing. The guys from the radio club quit coming to school. Well, I decided in 1962, the last year that my dad was alive, that I wanted to learn the code. So a friend of mine, the same one who worked at WBLY, who basically was the CEO, the Champion City Broadcasting Company, of course, which is no more, has been gone. He was the one that ran the thing, and there was an attorney and a businessman in Springfield who were the three people behind WBLY. Well, there was a department store in Springfield then called Fashion Fair. And I'd gotten one of these Caravel sets or whatever it was, and it was I don't know what it really was, Jim. It was an AM radio with a little microphone. You could play radio, but it just didn't work right. Well, in the process, I got a 45 record of learning the Morse code. So the easiest letters for me to learn were S, H, and I. And I don't have to tell you what the last letter was. And I just, I thought, man, that is cool. So then I learned O. So, hey, man, what if you send SOS, 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 SOS? So I didn't put this in the article you read, but my brother made me mad one day. And I had heard that if you took a flashlight and you heard a plane go over, we live fairly close to the Springfield Municipal Airport. I heard that if you would take that flashlight and send SOS, SOS, the pilot would, might see it, or you could say hi, did it, and the pilot might wave his wings at you. So I got mad at my brother, and I said, I'll fix you. So I heard a plane, I took that flashlight for all I was worth and kept doing that. And there was another plane, and another, I kept doing that, Joe. Well, I got bored with the game. And it wasn't about a half hour, 45 minutes later, the sheriff's department came out and said, we're looking for somebody who was sending code with a light. And a pilot thought he recognized the location. So I had some tall explaining to do about that. So anyhow, that was one of the things with the code that I did. And in 1965, we had a new industrial arts teacher, Starling Hutt, W8 Quebec Echo Mike. And he did not know how to teach blind guys how to work with power tools and all that. He was afraid. And at the time, the school, because of the lack of funding then, could not get the teachers they needed with the expertise that would have been required, Jim. So, anyhow, I wasn't in the class. It was another class. Somehow he found out that we had a ham station and everything. And he said, well, what do you guys want to do? Learn industrial arts or learn ham radio? Yeah, we want ham radio, man. Forget about that old junk. So that's all we did, and if you got your license, you had an A the rest of the year, whether you did anything or not. You could sleep in the class. He didn't care. So anyhow, I learned the code. I had a hard time with that. And, A did B da did it, and all that. I said, man, I can't get it. So a buddy of mine says, hey, Tom, I know how we can do this, how you can learn it real quick. If we tell dirty jokes with the code, and we all people names and everything, son, you can get it. Well, he was right. I learned it overnight, and I passed my code test 2 or 3 days later. Well, that was okay, Jim, but the theory presented a problem for me, buddy, for the novice. And my test came in, and me and a bunch of guys, we took it on a cold, snowy January in '66. And I failed. My instructor said, "And likens, you did stinking." So anyway, what happened was I said, "Ah, man, I don't know how to fool with this." So anyhow, to make a long story short, I did get my novice ticket. But then I heard that, man, all the rigs, you had to load and tune and dip the plate, and I knew I was in trouble. In the meantime, I had gotten into CB back in '63. Of course, my mother had to get the license because they would not issue me a call sign since I was less than 18. And so I thought, hey, man, CB's kind of cool. That's a whole other story. But anyhow, I was enjoying the heck out of it. I was in the junior CB club, the president of it, and really wreaking havoc with the CBers in Springfield and Clark County back in the day. I could write you a book on some of those things, too. We had CB jamborees that were like ham fests and coffee breaks at various restaurants and visiting different people's houses and stuff. That was really neat back then. So anyway, I passed my test, and I wanted a rig. Well, in Christmas of '65, we went down to Custom Electronics in Dayton. It was on Brown Street there by where the VA hospital is, a National Cash Register, and went in there and bought a Telekrafter SX120 receiver, which I didn't know. It was just a communications receiver. It really wasn't a ham receiver. And it was hot on the broadcast band and mediocre everywhere else. You couldn't hear sideband on it. And on CW drifting and everything. So I got my license, and Mom said, well, you need a better receiver. So we went back and bought a Hammerlin HQ110. Well, back at that time in Springfield, Ohio, there was about a dozen radio stores there, Jim. We had Lafayette Radio, we had Everly Radio, we had Standard Radio, we had R&R Communications, Biggs Electronics, Herb's Radio and TV. Everybody had some sort of ham radio stuff. DeVore Electronics in Enid, and all this, man, that was just so cool, man. It was the radio mecca, other than if you lived in Dayton or Columbus, because it was right between them. So anyway, the guy at the Lafayette store had this Heathkit DX20. Well, he said, I know you're going to burn this thing up.
So tell me about tube-type radios and how a blind person functions with that.
Well, everybody has their own way. At the time under discussion, I didn't know that there were any audible meters around, so to make a long story short, I got disgusted with ham radio and got out of it. I said, man, if you just have to load and tune, I said, I don't need ham radio, forget about it. Well, the exception to that rule was the Central Electronics 200V and the 100V, which you did not have to load or tune. That was a broadband transmitter made by Central Electronics, and it used bias batteries in it. They had another way to deliver the bias, and I don't understand how it all worked. So anyway, I just got out of ham radio when all this happened. And so then my interest started going into what would be my, I guess you might say my avocation, which was police communication. And when I was a junior in high school, actually it started before that, when I was a sophomore, a friend of mine had been elected sheriff of the county at that time, and I called him and said, man, I'd like to come down there and learn how to dispatch. So anyhow, it never got to happen until I was a junior in high school. I was the happiest kid in the world. Our sheriff at the time, who was Harold M. Bud Mills, who, by the way, was a bonus baby for the New York Yankees, and I didn't know that till he passed this last April. He had an anti-drug program that he put on in all the schools in Clark County then. And I was sitting down in front, and he came to me, he says, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, well, I'll just go home and just kick around on the radio, I guess. He said, well, why don't you come down and we'll talk about you coming to work. I'll tell you what, Jim, butter wouldn't melt in my mouth. I wanted the school day, and so I ran off the bus and told Mom I had to go to the sheriff's office. She said, what are you talking about? She'd been working in the yard and the garden. Well, I got to clean up, so she took me down, and they said they'd bring me back home. So in the meantime, I had been listening to the statewide sheriff's network, which at that time was on VHF low band, and it operated similarly to how the Kentucky State Police used 2 years ago. So I'd memorized everybody's call sign in the area, their numerical sequences and all that. And he and his chief administrator, J. Arthur Schumann, were impressed. So to make a long story short, I started working there that Saturday in April of 1970. And I learned real quick that a lot of what goes on never gets out on the air. And so I enjoyed that, but later on I had a problem of my own making. And so I didn't know any better, and I was just a young, immature kid when I look back on it. I said something on the radio that I shouldn't have said. I didn't cuss anybody out, but I demeaned their character over the air, literally. Well, that was my undoing. So when I was told not to come back, I said, does the sheriff know about this? And the sergeant said, I don't know, and I don't care if he does or not. So I went home and told Mom about it. So my mom, who's always been my #1 defender, called every deputy she could find and said, has my son ever done anything or said anything to offend you? Because if he does, and if he did, he will apologize. I'll drag his sorry butt down there, and he'll straighten it out. And one of my friends on another shift, Jim Harper, said he's one of the nicest young men I've ever met. He says, it's these other guys that are the problem. So I called the sheriff Monday, and I told him, I asked him if he'd heard about it. He said, yeah, I heard a little bit about it. So I explained my side, and he said, well, you come back down this next weekend, and we'll iron it out. So that Saturday I went back down, and I was walking through there, and all of a sudden that sergeant started to speak, and the sheriff came through, and he said, Sergeant Posey, Tom's going to dispatch on the weekend. You've got stuff to do out in the cruiser. Well, that was okay, Jim, but the deputies gave me a cold shoulder. They wouldn't do anything for me. You know, if I had them, if they were going to eat someplace, I'd have them get me something and bring it in. They wouldn't even do that. And they wouldn't even give me any food that they had fixed at the jail. And things just got from bad to worse, bad to worse. So I finally saw that I wasn't wanted, so I just quit. Well, that was after I went to the college prep program at the University of Evansville, where they used to send blind kids back in the 70s to see, you know, if they could hack it in college, because you took a couple of college courses in the summer quarter there. And I guess I did okay, and I was entered in a 2-year program, what was then Clark County Technical Institute. It's now Clark State College today. And I was in the law enforcement program, of course. And that didn't work out for me because I did not have any books. You know, back then, it was tough to get any books brailled. All the books I had, if I got them, were on open reel tape. And I just didn't get them. So I withdrew midterm, and in the meantime, my brother who lived here, my oldest brother who came down here many years ago, he was dying of brain cancer. And what we would do, we would send cassette tapes back and forth. And I just made the statement offhandedly, well, if you guys down there ever need a good dispatcher, you let me know. Well, I never thought anything about it, Jim. The state wanted me to go for vocational evaluation at Goodwill Industries in Dayton. And I told them that if I ever had a job, I was leaving, I was terminating myself. Here again, I was told I was being very immature, I was acting like a kid. Blind people just didn't do what I did. And I was being totally unrealistic. So, on the last Friday of June of '72, I'd just gotten home. And I got a call. My brother says, get your clothes packed. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, they're having a big celebration down here around the 4th of July, the sesquicentennial. And he and the mayor were good friends. My brother did electrical contracting for the city at that time. And he said, I told him about you, and he's interested. He says, you got the job if you want it. So I came down to Louisa, and he said, if nothing else, you might have fun for a week or two, and then you can go back and just chalk it up as an experience. Well, man, that's all I can think about. Man, a job that actually, paid. Of course, I didn't realize a lot of the other things that went along with the job, like the long hours, and, oh, man, your relief not showing up. You had to stay. You couldn't leave. So that time went, and my brother said, well, I'm sick and I'm dying. He said, I cannot rack you back and forth from town to 13 miles each way where I live. He said, we're going to have to find you a place here in town to live. And we looked at the paper, and there was a little mobile home for rent, just about like a travel trailer. And it was, he says, now, this is within walking distance of your work. So you can learn how to walk there by yourself and back to work. You've got to be able to get back and forth by yourself, which, of course, I knew. They taught that to us at Goodwill Industries in Dayton. Well, anyway, he said, but first we need to see if you got a job. So I went to the chief of police, and I said, his name is Dempsey Bradley. And I said, Dempsey, this thing's over. Do I go back to Springfield or do I stay? And he said, quote, hell no, Tom, you can't go. You got to stay. Of course, at that time, we were only getting paid $1 an hour was all we were getting. And later on, the pay went up in December to $1.50 an hour, and then as minimum wage went up, why, it went up. So that's how I came to Louisa. There are a lot of stories and things I've been involved with. The Great Fire in 1974 that I dispatched by myself. There's no help when the town just about was leveled. And that's a summons substance of how that was, Jim. KC9VKV, K4LID.
Roger, Tom. KC9VKV. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I really wanted to check out a couple of things here. You, as you were in your amateur radio career in the beginning, had some kind of disastrous results with a power amplifier or linear that blew up or burned up in the house because of, was it bad tuning, or what happened there?
It was a Heath DX20 transmitter, put out 35 watts. The antenna was poorly constructed, and I had no clue what I was doing.
Roger, and so the amplifier was running untuned or detuned, Roger?
Well, there was no amplifier, Jim. It was a novice transmitter. There was no amplifier.
Roger, I got you. But it did meet its demise, and the odor did linger in the household for a little while, Roger?
About a year, yes. Mom tried everything she could to get rid of it, but she couldn't get rid of it.
And, of course, she blamed you for that, Roger?
Well, she understood, so no, not really, but I always heard about it enough. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I think we all have our crosses to bear from our younger lives as fledgling electronic experts and making some decisions that in retrospect maybe we could have prevented if we had better knowledge of our situation, Roger.
Well, that's right, and I didn't know what I was doing, and my brothers were all gone. There was just me and Mom. She said she was working. She didn't know. And I was literally on my own.
Roger. Well, Tom, I have enjoyed the QSO with you, sir, and if there's anything that you wanted to add that we haven't touched on, go ahead.
All right, well, I will tell you how I got back into ham radio.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, I was out of it until I came back to Kentucky, and I met a couple of hams here in town. One of them's a silent key now. And I asked him if there was any activity here in Louisa, and we get on now and then. And this other guy said, we want to put on a repeater here in Louisa, and we'd like you to be a control operator and monitor the thing, but you got to get your license. I said, man, I don't care nothing about amateur radio. It's stupid. I said, it's just an advanced form of CB is all it is. Well, a former policeman wanted me to teach him the code, so I did. And he took his code test and passed it. And I don't know if it was a mistake or not, but when the written came back, he got his test, and then there was an extra test. So my other buddy said, well, Tom, I got a test here. You might as well see if you can pass it and take it. So I did. And, okay, I got my call sign. My call sign at that time was WD4RWU, issued in 78. And so anyhow, I studied and got my tech ticket. And they put the repeater on the air. And I guess the rest is history. I upgraded and got my general back in 81. And I've been on HF pretty much since that time, Jim.
Roger. Tom, I've enjoyed speaking with you, and we're going to put this thing together. It probably is running long at the moment, so I'm going to have to do a little editing inside, but I sure appreciate the story, man.
Well, I'm glad to do it. I really appreciate you asking me. I've got more stories and things I could tell. I could tell you about the Great Fire of '74, and I could tell you about a guy from Murder Incorporated coming into town to try to kill somebody. Man, we got a lot of stuff that went on here back in the day.
Well, let's just mark this to be continued, Roger.
Well, we can do it, Jim. I've got a lot of stories I can tell you.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. KC9VKV.
Thank you, Jim. KC9VKV, K4LA.